Welcome to the second episode of the Toonzone podcast for the week of November 13th. My name is Ben Applegate, editor-in-chief of Toonzone News. With us this week, we have Karl Olson, our producer in Kirkwood, Washington, which is near Seattle.
Hello.
We have Matthew Williams, our graphics editor in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
I like pie.
And we have Ian Lueck, otherwise known as Speedy Boris, on the forums, one of our staff reviewers in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Oh, great to be here.
Okay, say something with your real voice now.
Sure. Hey, Toonzone, how you doing?
There you go. Toshio Suzuki is apparently trying to make sure we have lots of big Ghibli news every week, because last week he announced that the next Ghibli movie will be directed by Miyazaki Hayao's son, Goro Miyazaki. And the question everyone is asking is, nepotism or nepotawesome? Okay, that's not the question everyone is asking. No one knows if he has any animation experience or anything. But we do know that he has experience in landscaping. Apparently he worked at a landscaping company and he designed the garden on the roof of the Ghibli Museum. But otherwise, nobody seems to know much about this guy. Apparently in the past, there were the three films that had been announced, the concepts that had been announced, turned out to be films for the Ghibli Museum, and the one that has not been used, Nausicaa.net reports, it's about a river, and it has boats trading things on it, so that might be what the film is about, but obviously we're still waiting on the December 13th announcement date for what the next film is going to be based on. So, I don't know, it could be a good thing, it could be a very, very bad thing, but we'll find out, won't we?
Yeah, this is where we find out where is this an innovative idea, or is this like appointing somebody to the head of FEMA who's only worked in horse training? I highly doubt
we all know how good that turned out.
Well, yeah, I highly doubt it will be that disastrous, but I do believe there is a potential where, on one hand, it's nice to have fresh blood, somebody who has perhaps the potential to do something other than an environmental diatribe, unlike everyone else at Ghibli. But on the other hand, it could be very boring or just wrong because he just doesn't have the experience in it. Because it seems that when people who don't have actual animation experience try to make a cartoon, the results are disastrous to tragic.
Well, and also the criticism is going to be much harder on him because of whose son he is.
Apparently, Miyazaki's father, Hayao Miyazaki, is still fiercely against the idea.
Right.
Maybe they should listen to him.
Yeah, like, what does that guy know? He only ever won, like, an Oscar or something. Gosh.
Well, but he is a curmudgeon, you have to remember. And, I mean,
he hates everything.
Exactly, he hates everything.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
Hey, how old is he?
I don't know, he's like 60 maybe, something like that?
He's got to be getting up there because he was directing stuff back, you know, he directed, like, the first Lupin series and stuff.
Yeah, that's something I should know.
Okay.
Oh, well. Okay, the other big news this week, I mean, everyone saw this coming. The Boondocks, apparently using the N-word 40 times an episode causes people to lift some eyebrows. We had an article in the LA Times last week and in other places about black advocacy groups that were protesting the use of the word on Cartoon Network. Among them were the Los Angeles Urban Policy Roundtable, and the president of that said, Aaron Magruder is a socially aware black critic. Boondocks will be seen by and influence thousands. His use of the vile, offensive, and racist N-word does a disservice to himself and his readers. There's also a black Islamic group that protested it. It's a hard issue always, of course, but I mean, it's just, I find it strange that we're debating this about a show on a cartoon channel. I just never thought I'd see the day, you know. I mean, it's a good step for animation, obviously. I mean, it's a question as to whether it's a good thing for African Americans, but...
Well, I never thought I'd see the day that we'd be arguing about live-action content on the Cartoon Channel. The rant last week. But...
All right.
But I honestly think, I don't know, maybe it's gone a little too far. I mean, I can see using it once or twice, but like the stream of racial epithets in that is almost constant. You have to worry, is it a little too edgy for Cartoon Network? It could fit on Comedy Central, but...
I don't really think so, because it's, when you take it in context, I don't really have a problem with it. And especially when you consider that the main star of the show is, I mean, the old guy, who is actually pretty,
absolutely,
you know, even-keeled, and he gets along with everybody, or at least tries to. I think when you take those two things together, I mean, it's not like everybody in the show is saying these words, and especially, like, if white people are saying them, I can just imagine there'd be a whole lot more problems with it. And I don't see why people are making a big deal out of black people saying it, because they can say it to each other, and it's not a big deal.
Well, I mean, but there's always been a debate about that as well. I mean, it hasn't just always been that black people can say it to each other. There's been a lot of groups that think black people really shouldn't say it to each other, so.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a hard question.
I think
I
think there's a cultural aspect where it's like, on one hand, there's a division there, and it's making this division kind of apparent. If you have the people who are like, this is part of the vernacular, it's part of what's being used, and you've got the other people who are saying, but it's not something that should be celebrated. But I'm not sure the Boondocks really celebrates that at all. They seem to be often pretty critical of those aspects of the culture. Like, yes, it exists, but it's not something that, should be worn necessarily with a badge of pride. I mean, Magruder so often comes out so hard on the people who actually glorify the attitudes which made that word part of the modern vernacular among African American youth. I mean, he's come down really hard on, of course, BET, which, yes, they censor that word in their videos, but yet they still glorify the rest of that gangster culture, which is basically where that word is being used. So I think it's a way of being honest, and I don't think he's necessarily has it in there to say, yes, this is a perfectly acceptable word to use. He's saying, look at some of who's using it. I mean, the characters, particularly in the case of Riley, Riley's not to be emulated. Huey's, of course, moderated a bit more in the comic strip than in the cartoon at this point with, he's got all these, he's very idealistic, he's very driven, but there's an element of it, no one takes that seriously. No one takes that kind of youthful exuberance with any sort of merit.
Youthful exuberance.
I'm trying to sound literate, but
I
can't read.
All right, we got the cast announced this week for the next DreamWorks animated film, Kung Fu Panda, or much of the cast. Originally, we knew that Jack Black was going to be playing Po the Panda from the press release called "The Laziest of All the Animals in the Valley of the Peace." He apparently shows the mark of the chosen one, and so I guess it's going to be a kung fu comedy type deal. Dustin Hoffman will also be in it, playing a kung fu master. Jackie Chan will play a kung fu monkey. And Ian McShane will play a snow leopard named Tai Lung, and Lucy Liu is apparently also in discussions to be in the film. It's another big star cast for DreamWorks. Has anyone seen art from this film? There's some of it out there.
I haven't checked out the art yet, but I can tell from that cast it's just going to be like everything else DreamWorks puts out.
Right,
I mean, the usual, yes, we've got a whole bunch of celebrities, but not necessarily anything that fresh or original to do with it, because Kung Fu parody is not only something that's sort of become a tradition in the U.S., it exists in the Kung Fu industry as well through people like Stephen Chow who do, Kung Fu Hustle, Shaolin Soccer, God of Cookery. Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily anything that innovative, and I think that fits with DreamWorks. They're not necessarily...
Well, that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, they're looking for sort of surefire hits, and this will be something that people who are like hardcore into animation will be like meh about, but any average theater goer is going to be like, hey, it's funny, it makes me laugh for 75 to 90 minutes, and that's all I think they care about. I mean, especially considering DreamWorks just released their Q3 earnings and they were not that great. It's because of Wallace and Gromit. They had to take a write-off for Wallace and Gromit. That was very significant. Well, but I think in the long term,
do the DreamWorks animation numbers still reflect the main DreamWorks numbers?
No. It's all separate. Just DreamWorks Animation. Yeah.
Well, I think though they did take a hit as far as the American profits for Wallace and Gromit. I think internationally that film is going to have legs and really serve them well. I mean, it's already topped
it has already. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it topped the box office in Korea, which is really hard to do because usually what tops the box office in Korea is Korean films. Foreign films oftentimes will be scheduled opposite weekends of Korean debuts because they don't want to be facing the local competition. So the fact that Wallace and Gromit was able to top the box office there means that it's got to, I mean, maybe it won't work in the States, and I don't think it was necessarily reasonable to think it was going to work that well in the U.S. because British humor really only plays in a few areas of the United States really well. So I mean,
it's another thing that's strange is that I don't really think it's quintessential. I mean, there's a lot of British humor in it.
Right.
But when I've seen Koreans watching sort of the dry British humor type stuff, they just don't get it. But this is a lot more of the wacky and cute stuff. So
right. Well, it's cartoony, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, the British humor just doesn't translate well. The drier humor just doesn't translate well.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Well,
But I mean, I think when I last
really.
looked, it earned something like $50 million. I'm sure it's earned more since then, but it earned something like $50 million domestically in the U.S. and $100 million overseas.
Right.
So yes, they're definitely going to make back their investment.
Right. And
in the overseas. Yeah.
I also think that the video sales for it will be probably fairly strong. I think it's going to be something where it's like I haven't gotten a chance to check it in theaters, and I may not given my schedule, but I know I'll go out and buy the DVD. And I'll buy whatever the nicest version of that DVD is. So within reason.
Leading into that. As Matthew Williams was pointing out before we started recording this, the box office numbers are out for this week. And Chicken Little is still at the top of the pack, which is a pretty impressive feat, especially considering a competitor for a similar demographic, Zathura, came out this last weekend. Zathura came in second place with $14 million, but Chicken Little stayed in first with $32 million, 20% drop, which is pretty excellent, all things considered.
Is the Zora that Jumanji sequel? Or?
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Right.
Which is, I think, put it this way, Zathura is in the same demographic, but it didn't strike me as something that was going to have necessarily the ability to top something that really had launched solidly like Chicken Little. I mean, put those head to head.
Zathura skews a little bit older, but
Yeah.
it's still a very similar group.
Right.
And I think that this might just be a generalization, but it seems like parents would want to like take their kids to a cartoon instead of a live action movie.
Yeah.
Maybe. I'm just throwing it out there.
It seems like a better bet, yeah, doesn't it?
Well, I mean,
especially if that cartoon has the Disney name on it, because that still has some cash.
Exactly.
And apparently, it's doing really well as far as the Disney movies. Like, obviously, it's not beating out like The Incredibles or Finding Nemo, which at this point had about 150 million. But it's doing pretty better than the more recent Disney-only stuff. Like Brother Bear had 44 million by this point. Lilo and Stitch had 77. So.
And you have to consider that, I mean, for basically a studio's debut film, because and Disney rebuilt their entire studio from the ground up, basically.
They didn't really save a lot. I mean, they saved a few of the creative types from the 2D days, but there's an incredible amount of people who, even though their skills would necessarily transfer over into 3D like storyboarders, they disappeared. So there's a lot of from scratch in this, and for what's largely a from scratch project and something that probably did have a pretty good degree of executive interference, it's doing pretty well.
Definitely. And it's a pretty good film, which is the other thing, so. So the Hollywood Reporter laid the odds on the Oscar race this week, and it said that probably Wallace and Gromit: Curse of the Were-Rabbit and Tim Burton's Corpse Bride were the big players for the award rather. So it's a year for stop motion animation, which is kind of an impressive feat, I guess. I mean, if 2 years ago was the year of anime, this year is the year of clay. It's what they said on the article. So. I don't know. I'm really glad that multiple media of animation are getting recognition like this, and I don't know which one I'd root for. Really, I think it's really up in the air. So we'll see.
I'd still root for Wallace and Gromit. I saw both Corpse Bride and Wallace and Gromit, and hands down, Wallace and Gromit was probably the funnier, more creative, more interesting film.
Oh, I don't know if you'd call it more creative, though. I mean, I know it was funnier and it was wackier and it did have bigger colors and everything. But Corpse Bride had a real art in the way it was made, and the subtlety of the character movements was just something we have never ever seen before in stop motion animation. Just the way
it was probably one of the more beautiful films I've seen.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I think in personal taste, if I had to choose Corpse Bride over Wallace and if I had to choose Corpse Bride and Wallace and Gromit, I'd go for Wallace and Gromit.
All right. Well, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, obviously it's going to be a personal choice. And like I said, I don't really know which one I'd choose. So.
I'm just glad to see the Oscars, when it at least comes to the animation, rewarding stuff that's really artistic, not necessarily commercial. I'm glad.
Well, they haven't rewarded anything yet, so.
Well, they haven't yet, but I'm glad to see that seems to be what people are figuring for. I'm glad it's not necessarily as contaminated with like blatant lobbying on the part of the studios, so that you end up picking actually good films as opposed to just like, oh yeah, this was the huge movie this year.
Bob and Harvey and Weinstein haven't opened an animation studio.
Yeah, that helps.
That kind of.
This is true.
There's no Miramax animation outside of the Clerks animated series, which I'm sure if it had been theatrical, they would have lobbied for and tried to get it to win the Oscar that year.
Oh.
What's the situation with the Clerks animated movie that's coming? Is that
not going to be animated. It's going to be Clerks 2 is going to be live action. So.
And it's coming out next year. Like most of my people know Bob and Harvey split from Disney.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Was one of the big things. Now they've opened up their own studio called the Weinstein Company, so they're going to be bringing it out next year.
There's also a Hellboy animated project coming out that sort of got leaked / we heard about last week. IDT Entertainment sublicensed the rights to Hellboy animated project from Revolution Studios. And apparently Ron Perlman and Selma Blair are going to be involved as voice actors for Hellboy and Liz Sherman. And Mike Mignola and Hellboy director Guillermo del Toro are creative producers. We don't know exactly how involved they're going to be. Apparently, Sean Galloway posted on Newsarama that it's going to air on Cartoon Network. Apparently he wasn't supposed to say that, so he deleted it, but that might not be true. But obviously it'd be really cool if it did. So we'll see. Should be interesting. It's going to be 2 direct-to-DVD movies, 70 minutes each. And I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, the one piece of art that's been released just looks really cool, sort of like a Samurai Jack kind of style almost.
Yeah, this is probably
neat.
like the one anime project that I'm legitimately psyched for. It looks really like it has potential, and I did like the Hellboy movie, so.
I was just going to say Hellboy is really good as a live action film, and with animation there's like limitless possibilities. And so I think that if they play their cards right, they could churn out something that's even better than the live action movie, which is already good to begin with. So I got high hopes too.
I think the weird thing with this is, when they were thinking of having Gonzo studios in Japan do something with it, and this seems to be a different issue, but if they're still, I'm curious to see who's going to actually be doing the animation itself, because that could be a pretty big hinge as to how well it works, because if it's done right, if it's done with really nice and clean animation, I think it could be maybe not only be a couple of really great DTVs that get aired on television somewhere later, but they could end up being, they could be the launch for a series. But if they're done kind of weekly, even if they've got good writing and sort of good basic stuff, if they can't realize the visual concept art properly, it might be a little underwhelming and just sort of, I don't know. I'm taking a wait and see approach on it, because some of this DTV stuff that's been done before is kind of weak.
Did you see the Van Helsing?
Yeah, I saw
DTV?
that. And there was some stuff in that was really nice, but then there was some stuff in that where I'm like, I wish they had an extra week or something so they could have rendered that piece of CG better or composited that scene better. It felt a little rushed. I mean, it was nice that they had all the, they had all the key players there, and they had a sort of an interesting story, bringing it all together, and it tied into the movie really well. But it would have been nice if they hadn't tried to rush it as much, because it would have made something that I think, one, would have been more ready for television. It would have been something I think they could have gotten on Cartoon Network for Adult Swim, or I guess these days Toonami, given the TV-14 rating on Batman. But I don't know. I just hope they're taking it. I hope they're doing this with the idea of taking their time, like when the Japanese do direct-to-video stuff, it's because they're going to spend a lot more money on it and spend a lot more time on it. And I hope they're taking the same idea. They're working under the same idea here for the Hellboy DTVs, because
they can only hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gonzo did the Transformers anime series. Like they're still doing it, right? Or did they switch?
I think I'm not sure I think Gonzo is doing the G.I. Joe series that's currently running on 4Ks. Which again, I think they either didn't get enough budget or they didn't get enough time. Because I know Gonzo can do better compositing work. I know they can do better character animation, and I know they can do better 3D.
Was Gonzo the one that did Armada?
No, I don't think they were. I don't think they were Armada, but I can't remember who was.
Okay, because whoever did Armada, that still scarred me. Like, the animation was just so terrible.
Well, it was also unfinished. I mean, that was the other part of the problem, is the Transformers series, we kept getting unfinished animation for the show, so there'd be stuff that wasn't colored right. Which would then confuse people who were writing the script as to which robot it was, and yeah, that's part of the, this gets back into the thing of, pretty much any studio can do the job right, but you've got to give them time and at least some budget. But especially time. If you give them time, they can maybe cheat the budget.
I'm seeing under the company credits for Transformers Armada, by the way, just a couple of companies that have worked on basically just other low-budget shonen shows like Beyblade and that sort of thing. So,
okay,
nobody big.
All right.
Right.
Well, I think it's interesting because I think it's only been IG and Gonzo that have really shown a lot of active interest with working with American partners. Everyone else seems to either keep to themselves or just they can't ever seem to find the time to work with the American schedule. Because Madhouse.
Well, I'm sure the cooperation on Armada was through TV Tokyo. So.
Right. Well, there though there was an element of Hasbro kind of commissioning it. They were like, we will put in a big piece of money to have this done, and
right.
Because Transformers in a sense can't work without Hasbro and Takaro's blessing.
Although really, the glory days of Transformers are long past.
Yeah.
After, like, Armada, and probably Robots in Disguise, it just start going downhill. Mm. But then again, I really consider Beast Wars to beat out Batman as the best action animated series of the 1990s.
Beast Wars was incredible. I mean...
It was just... Like, everyone loves Batman, but I'm sorry... Beast Wars, especially in that second season, just was
Beast Machines.
Powerful.
Beast Machines was amazing.
I saw Beast Machines.
Yeah.
Beast Machines was.
A lot of people don't like Beast Machines as much, but I just think just because it was so much prettier. I mean,
yeah,
sorry,
Beast
I'm a very
Machines
visual
had
person.
So much better animation than Beast Wars.
Yeah.
But Beast Wars had much better writing. Because it was funny. It was like I think. Code of Hero was the only episode of any animated series that had me near tears.
What are we watching this week, Carl?
I bought a bunch of DVDs on Friday, so I watched disc 6 of Samurai Champloo, which was quite good. They really sort of cut loose. They had a very serious episode at the beginning of the disc, which continued a two-parter from the last disc. I think Jenny broke up virtually every two-parter when it came to Samurai Champloo, which is really annoying. But
that is irritating.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it means that the last disc has I think the last 3 episodes are a 3-parter for that, so that way that's all together. But this disc, the other 2 episodes were just pure comedy. I mean, they had sort of a zombie thing going on, which was just priceless. And then they had a baseball episode, which was even better. I mean, just amazingly exaggerated, funny animation and great story. Then I watched the first 2 discs of Standalone Complex Second Gig, and damn, that's an excellent show. I mean...
Isn't it just? Oh, man.
I mean, Standalone Complex was pretty... I mean, I liked it. I mean, I like how it handles near-future science fiction. But Standalone Complex, too, because you don't have as much introduction, you don't have as much sort of in the way of just cutting to the chase and getting into story, plus the fact that rather than sort of having one ongoing thread and then off-topic stuff, they have 2. It's just so much more intense, so much tighter, so much little bits of attention to detail where there's something that you'll see for a split second in an episode, and that's the clue that this guy has a connection to that particular thing in that episode. There's that level of drive behind it, that level of complexity that makes it very engaging and very rewarding, and of course it's a beautiful show. IG, I think in some ways, even though with IGPX they have more budget, they're not necessarily... Okay, the movement's more fluid, but the color design isn't quite as intriguing with the...
Well, this is a big labor of love for them. I mean,
right.
That film was the first thing they ever did. So.
Right. Well, and the thing is that they have, when it comes to budget for Standalone Complex 2, they have not only Bandai backing them, but Manga Entertainment's putting money in at that point. And the thing is Bandai had already sold the rights to season 1 to Cartoon Network, so I'd have to imagine that sort of not necessarily directly, but some of the money that was made from that sale to Cartoon Network went into funding the second season. So they had a lot of cash to play with.
Did manga actually put money into it, or is it just because of some licensing issue from the first film?
I think they actually, for the second season, put some cash into it. Not necessarily as much as Bandai, but I think it was part of the reason why they were listed as a co-producer on the actual Japanese, Japanese credits this time, as opposed to getting it on just the U.S. discs. Even in the Japanese credits, they're one of the people who get a little nod in there.
All right, Matthew, what have you been watching?
Okay, I have the hugest DVD backlog. I just ordered and got this week Simpsons 6th season, which, I know it came out in August, so it's not recent, but it's still probably the tail end of the golden age. Most people think it ended around season 9. I think Simpsons started to tail off around season 7 for me.
I agree. Because I take a look at season 7 and the last 2 episodes of season 7 where you had the second to last was Summer of 4'2", which is the one where Lisa tries to reinvent herself and it sort of fails, which is a very character-driven episode. It's very funny, but it's sort of like the apex of the Simpsons writing when it comes to trying to develop a character without overdeveloping it and making it ridiculous. And then the episode right after that is the Hullabalooza episode, which at the time everyone's like, oh, this is really cool. They've got all these rock bands. But when you think about it, it's the first time you really see Homer not do anything that's like a normal day-to-day sitcom kind of event, where it's like, okay, he's going to work. No, he's part of this whole freak show thing as a side, and it's this, it's the beginning of him not doing stuff that you'd expect a guy who works at a nuclear power plant to do.
And
I had a bunch of guest stars, of course, as well, which is the first of the Simpsons having like 20 different guest stars in one episode bit as well.
Not really.
Oh, they did that before then. Yeah,
they did that before. The Krusty comeback and the baseball episode.
Right. Well, they did find a pretty good way of weaving that in, though. I mean, for those 2 episodes, they made it make sense. Like, if Krusty is somebody who has, like, all these entertainment connections, he's an entertainer, obviously these people are going to be kind of turn out, and it's having them there is a natural way to then make fun of these comeback specials. Whereas, and the Spaceball thing, of course, Burns is loaded, so he's going to try and cheat by hiring pros. But
and that softball episode is probably one of the best episodes.
Oh yeah, it was hilarious. I mean, they had a lot of fun with like Ozzy going into the Springfield mystery spot. I love that, and of course Ken Griffey Jr. with gigantism.
Oh god, yeah.
And Steve Smith with radiation poisoning.
Sensed a bit of arbitrary guest starness creeping into season 6.
Right.
Like you had Tito Puente showing up in the
Music Lounge.
Music Lounge. And you just had look, it's Mel Brooks guest appearance in the Patty and Selma episode.
I don't know, I think it's kind of appropriate considering that he just totally randomly cameoed in all of his films anyway. I mean, I thought it was kind of played into that running gag a little bit.
Although season 6 has some of my favorite episodes, like the best Treehouse of Horror is the one in the set, number 5. Like, it's the best one. The one with the shitting and the cafeteria and the time and punishment.
It's actually scary, unlike the rest.
Yeah, the shitting was really kind of messed up. I mean, as much as there were jokes played in there, and of course, shots taken at The Shining, there was serious gore going on there. It's like Homer seriously intended to kill his family. There was no sort of comedic violence about it. And the thing is, I almost wonder if they'd make those kind of jokes today. I'm not sure whether the writing staff would be willing to, as much as they're willing to necessarily in some of the newer specials be more graphic, I'm not sure they're graphically comedic, not graphically they're gonna die.
Okay, Ian, what do you got?
Alright, I finally watched Spirited Away.
Oh, wow.
Finally.
You've never seen that before?
Not until now.
Oh, dude.
Isn't that amazing?
What'd you think?
I gotta be honest, I liked Kiki's Delivery Service better.
Wow.
That's gonna raise some eyebrows, isn't it?
Yeah.
Although here's the thing. I liked the visual aspect of Spirited Away a lot better. But in terms of characters and people I can relate to, Kiki won for me.
I don't know.
Yeah, that'll definitely.
I can see what you're saying, but I still prefer Sen.
Because like the plot for Spirited Away, it was there, but it was in my mind it was really threadbare. And I guess the same could be said about Kiki too. But you just went from one scene to another, and there wasn't really much of something to drive the plot forward, it seemed like.
No, it's very understandable, and there are a lot of people out there who think that Miyazaki's films since Porco Rosso have just sort of been going downhill, including Spirited Away. So, I mean, you definitely are in good company.
I also watched Dirty Bear. That was pretty good.
Classics.
Nice.
Project Eden. The other two weren't so good, but Project Eden was good.
We have one question this week from a listener, Grant M. on the forums. He asks, is it me or is Beavis and Butthead in the process of making a comeback? Between their surprise appearance on the MTV VMA Awards and the Mike Judge Collection Volume 1 DVD set, do you think we will see new episodes of the series soon? I haven't heard anything about that, but I don't know. I don't imagine so. I think it's just him going back and playing with the characters on sort of a one-shot.
I think I read an interview, and I don't remember where it was, but I read something that said, where he was asked, are you bringing them back? And he said no, but that could have been a couple of years ago. I don't know how recent it was. So, I doubt it, but there's always the possibility, especially since King of the Hill is probably going to be ending this year.
Right.
Right, so he'll be free.
So it is up in the air as to what he'll be doing. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. Although it is pretty cool to see it on the air again. Like, I think MTV2 has been running non-stop. They had a marathon last night.
Well, and it's something like if there were a time to bring it back, it'd be now when you've got the airways sort of saturated with a lot of adult animation. This would be a time to do it because I wouldn't necessarily anticipate that 2 years from now it would be as favorable. Like right now, bring it out strike while the iron's hot, but on the other hand, considering the lead time for an animated series, even if they wanted to like go into production on it tomorrow, it would still be a year before we saw anything if they were doing traditional animation.
Apparently he did just finish a film called Idiocracy. I don't know if you guys have heard anything about this, but
just the name.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
It's about a guy who gets picked by the government for a big hibernation program set 1,000 years in the future, and he finds out that society has decayed to the point where he's like the only moderately smart person in the world. I'm looking forward to that. I mean, obviously his
live action or animated?
I'm pretty sure it's live action, yeah.
That'll be good since he has proven his chops as a live action director with the cult classic Office Space.
Alright, it is actually live action. I'm looking at a picture of it now, so. That was the second episode of the Toonzone podcast. Be sure to join us again next week when we sit down with Michael Reaves, story editor of Batman the Animated Series and Gargoyles, Avi Melman, founder and producer at Cybergraphix Animation, and voice actor Yeni Alvarez for a peek at their new futuristic werewolf show, Guardians of Luna. The following week we sit down with animation scholar Jerry Beck to discuss his 2 new books. So submit questions for them or for us in text or MP3 format to tzpodcast@gmail.com. Of course, keep an eye on www.toonzone.net for great Toon news and reviews. In the coming week, Toonzone takes a look at Adult Swim's new anime parody series, Perfect Hair Forever. And now, a conservationist message from Japanese rocker Acid Man.